Because it is part of the NFL draft because we're a little bit psycho, the shit never stops. So as we're putting the wraps, and the wraps have been put on the 2024 NFL draft, although in the next week I'll be doing divisional grades for the draft. That's coming. We start looking ahead. And it's time, yes, to talk about the 2025 NFL draft, at least for now, right? So that's what I'm going to do. So let's do that. Yeah! My way too early, way too early 2025 NFL mock draft. Now, a couple of notes here. First, the draft order is solely based on the betting odds at DraftKings for the Super Bowl. That's it. There's no other opinions, no other injection of anything else from me. Literally going off of the Super Bowl odds. So the Chiefs and the 49ers being the two betting odds favorites, according to DraftKings right now, to make the Super Bowl next season. They're at the bottom. And the Panthers had the highest odds, meaning the lowest odds, whatever you want to call it. The worst odds, okay? That's why they're at number one. I know every time I do this, there always seems to be side conversations. Well, this team's not going to finish here. That team's not going to finish there. I don't give a fuck. That's not what it's about. Yell at a wall. Whatever. That's the first thing. Second thing is this is just a fun kind of theoretical exercise. Don't take it too seriously. Well, that player's not going to be taken there. You're probably right. And you also probably, just like me, don't have a ton of a clue of what's going to happen frickin' 11 and a half months from now. So just deal with it. Anyways, I do think, though, this can be informative and helpful of an exercise in a couple of ways. One, it gives you some type of idea as you start to look at kind of like consensuses across the board. Who are some of the players to really keep your eye on? Who are the players that are most likely to be near the top of every team's draft boards? Number two, it also, I think, starts to give you an early indication of what the strengths and weaknesses of that next year's draft class are. Like if you look at this year's draft class at the top, it was great offensively. Defensively, And then the overall theme of the draft was, once you got past 100 to 125 players, the talent level dropped off quite a bit. But in those first 3.5 to 4 rounds, it was pretty damn good. And I think that's largely true. That was largely accurate. This year, we'll see what the theme develops into. But I think a couple of things I'm taking away from this so far, and you can check out my mock in the description box below, is that it's going to be a much more prominent year and better year for the defensive side of the ball, and in particular the defensive front. I think I've got between defensive linemen, edge rushers, there's like 10 of them going in round one. Certainly a much better go for the defense overall this go round. I've got 3 corners going in the top 10. It's probably going to be a draft. If you need help on the defensive side of the ball, you could get some good help on the defensive side of the ball. It doesn't mean that the offense is totally irrelevant here. That's certainly not the case. I just expect you're going to see a little bit more of a balanced draft than what you saw as such a offense top heavy, offense loaded, offense front loaded draft back in April. So as we look at this mock draft, what stands out? Number one, if the Carolina Panthers, if they ended up with the number 1 overall pick, that would have to mean that Bryce Young sucked or he was hurt the whole year or anything that would make you think, hey, we need to, in Carolina, hurry up and move off of Bryce Young. Sunk cost, cut your losses, and move on. So I put James Pearce, the edge rusher from Tennessee, going number 1 overall, but realistically, if you're the Panthers and you ended up with that number 1 overall pick in 2025, you're looking quarterback, period. But for now, I'll use Pearce as kind of like the placeholder. Feels like early on he's a guy a lot of people are looking at as potentially being edge rusher 1 coming off the board. Top 10, top 5 talent. So there you go. The Patriots at 2. You just drafted Drake May. You invested on some weapons for him on the offensive side of the ball. The rest of the draft, now you got to protect him. That's where somebody like Will Campbell from LSU probably makes a ton of sense. You would have to think you would be investing on the offensive side of the ball, like you have to, right? But then we get to Tennessee, and let's just assume for a second, that if Carolina was picking number 1, they're going quarterback. New England at 2's not going quarterback. Tennessee at 3, with Will Levis only previously having been a second-round pick, they certainly could. And this is where you start to wonder, like, who will be quarterback 1. You're going to see a lot of talk about Shedeur Sanders. I'd expect some folks are going to be a little more on the Carson Beck bandwagon right now. And please don't take my having Carson Beck listed ahead of Shedeur Sanders or Cameron Ward or Quinn Ewers as any indication that I think Beck is QB1. It does not. It absolutely, positively does not. It is just me saying I could see something happening here. What you could take as an indication of how I'm thinking right now is seeing Travis Hunter and Luther Burden towards the top of the draft. I'd be really stunned, barring injury or dramatic drop-off in play performance in 2024. I'd expect those two guys are going to be top 10 picks in 2025. I'd expect there'd be lots of talk about them being the first guy off the board respectively at their positions. Now with Travis Hunter, the real question is going to be, what is he? Is he going to be more of a corner at the next level, or is he going to be a wide receiver at the next level? And I understand the temptation might be to play him at wide receiver. Right now, I think his real upside, I think his bigger upside, his more Pro Bowl All-Pro upside certainly comes at corner, and I would expect that they would go down that path with him. I'd have to think. That's where you would have to go. Meanwhile, for Luther Burden, a lot could change here, but it sure looks like he's an exciting, like, wide receiver 1 type of talent. So Washington would have to feel great, in my opinion, if they got somebody like him coming out of the draft. For the Raiders, I'd have to assume at this point, they can't really be serious with this Aiden O'Connell shit, can they? Like, that pudgy fuck you think is going to be your guy? Ugh. So I'm assuming next year the Raiders are definitely going to the draft looking at quarterback. And if they do, and Shedeur Sanders is there, it feels like a marriage made in heaven for both parties. I'd be stunned, frankly, if he didn't end up there, work himself, and end up going there and playing under Antonio Pearce. That's what I could see happening. If it was, it wouldn't be a bad spot for him to come into, assuming Devontae Adams would stick around. You've got Mykel Mayer. They just drafted Brock Bowers. That's an offense that does have some pieces. What they don't have is a fucking quarterback. For those wondering what I have the Bears drafting, you'll see I have them drafting Tyler Booker from Alabama, and that's a reflection in part of the continued belief and investment in talent to help Caleb Williams. If you look and you say to yourself, hey, Tyler Booker might be the best or second best interior lineman right now in next year's draft class on the offensive side of the ball, would you rather draft that or the 5th or 6th 3 technique or the 4th or 5th edge rusher at the tail end of round 1? I might go with the offensive guard because, Nate Davis might not be back for 2025. Tevin Jenkins may not be back for 2025. You got to place a premium on protecting Caleb Williams. So I know a lot of Bears fans right now are going to talk about the defensive front, and rightfully so. On paper, it's the biggest need this team has. A 3 technique, a complementary edge rusher opposite Montez Sweat. Those are massive needs. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at the bigger picture, when in doubt, always default to helping Caleb Williams. So that's why I've got them going offensive line at 19. 4 quarterbacks going in the top 14 picks. I'm not sold on the Texas kid. I will say that much right now. I haven't seen anything that makes me say, wow. I wonder how Cam Ward will do when going to Miami. Like, if he has a big season, his draft stock could certainly shoot up the boards. But like I said, it feels like if you're a team that's going to be looking overall for defensive help, this will be a good draft for you. And in some pockets, you can find some difference makers on the offensive side of the ball, but it certainly does not feel like it's going to be nearly as strong of a quarterback class, nearly as strong of an offensive class, especially at the top, and nearly not as strong of a class overall.